Hello everyone! So tonight I am with Dominique from le Chardon et la ficelle, and we will be talking about spinning. Hello Dominique!
Hi!
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm so glad to be speaking with you tonight.
Yeah, the pleasure is entirely mutual.
Yeah, and I think I'm not the only one to be very happy to be speaking with you tonight. We had so many positive responses on our social media when we announced you would be here tonight. I think it has maybe to see with the recent it's just engouement.
The excitement around
Excitement,
spinning,
yeah,
yeah.
the recent excitement around spinning. Maybe we can talk about this a little after.
That would be a good thing.
Yeah, because we really noticed a real excitement
That's
around
really
spinning
cool.
this year. Yeah, something happened. Something's in the air.
That's totally true. I
Yeah.
think there's just a boom of people suddenly being really interested with taking it up or just deepening what they know about it. It's really cool.
Yeah. Maybe before we talk about this, you can talk a little bit about your practice.
Yeah.
And since everyone is now discovering spinning, but how did you discover spinning first at the beginning, and how it all happened for you?
Yeah, well, so my textile practice has been like with me, I want to say my entire life. I've picked up a lot of things when I was a kid. My grandmothers were very, very involved in their communities, and one of my grandmother taught me to knit, and one other taught me to sew. So sewing was actually like really the first thing I got to really love about textile, and I used to, because I'm a really small person, so to actually get stuff that I liked to wear, it was really, really hard. So that was kind of my first foray into textile, was kind of like adapting stuff that I liked into stuff that fits me.
To customize a little bit of the.
Yeah, because like nothing would fit me that I liked. And I remember like I did like gala clothes for like one of my high school friends at some point, and like that was really what I liked during that period of my life. And then I moved out, and it became really hard to have the same space and the ability to like have a sewing machine on late at night, for example, where you live like in an apartment and you bother people. So that's when I really discovered like other textile things, and that's when I kind of picked up again knitting, embroidery, and I picked up again, not again, but I picked up at this point weaving, which I'm still doing, and I picked up natural dyeing, and I picked up spinning.
And so all of these were like in competition for you at this point.
Well, it was more like a kind of like continuation than a competition, because I will say, even though like spinning is my main kind of like focus in my practice, I don't see it as kind of like really different areas. I really feel it's kind of a whole practice for me.
As a whole.
Yeah, so that's it kind of all came together around the same time, and I started spinning, and I had a lot of false starts where it was kind of like, okay, I'm starting, oh, this is discouraging, or oh, I'm not really doing what I want. And so it happened over many, many years where I would spin for a few months, I would stop, spin again, I would get more knowledge, and eventually I got happier with what I did.
It was little bits here and there.
Yeah, and you kind of you get a sense of what you're doing. It's never really going away. And then I got a child, and certain things I couldn't do as easily. So, for example, I couldn't really weave pregnant, and I couldn't, like it was just not comfortable. And then for me, knitting isn't. It's not really taking my mind off of things in the same way that spinning does. And with like a young child, that was something I really needed more, was like that meditative aspect. And so that's kind of how it got there to me really focusing on spinning. It was really for the physicality of it and the ability to just kind of have my mind very present in the moment, something that is a little bit, I think, more difficult when you have a young child and you're like in the midst of everything going around you. And so that's kind of how it
yeah. So what really stuck with you was the possibility that you really could just focus on this,
yeah,
and just really be mindful of your hands and what you were doing.
yeah,
And
exactly.
as of now, would you say that it changed a little, and that you're a little bit more no, I don't want to say less focused, but that you can
Yeah,
think about something more?
it's interesting because it's actually kind of something that I try to keep with me when I spin. So it's something that I sometimes have to like consciously encourage, but I kind of try to put like sticks into my wheels to do that. So like if I find that like if a project just doesn't require my focus, I might stop that project and kind of go to something that requires more of my brain to be present. Because usually those projects where I can just do it mindlessly, they'll be the projects where I have like the least fun and that I won't really want to commit time to.
So you like the goal and the going there, like the défi. I have défi in mind. I have only French words tonight.
But yeah, I think the challenge is very linked to how I'm very present, and for me that's a really important part of it. So I try to keep it alive by making it difficult for myself.
Yeah, but I'm sure you, even if now you have more experience, I'm sure you still learn every time you spin
every
a new
day.
project.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why it's so good, is that by actually wanting to be mindful and not kind of doing it without being present, I have to actually find those challenges and find new things to do, or find just new fiber I haven't experienced with. So I get to know that and get to know those blends. And so by wanting that challenge, I actually keep learning every time I spin. And I don't get that kind of like boredom of just doing something out of habit. Like I try to keep that away from my practice as much as possible.
Do you prefer spinning with a spindle or
by miles?
Yes.
I actually like very, very, very rarely use my wheel. I use my wheel when I want to do worsted yarns, and like I want it to be done like that way. But otherwise, I always spin with spindles, and those are like my main thing. And again, it's very much for the physicality of it.
Contact and
there's something like very primitive. I don't know if it's the right word, but it's such a basic movement that like accompanied like humankind from its inception, and it feels very grounding for me. Spinning in a wheel for me feels more productive, but that's not really what I'm aiming for in general. I'm really aiming for that moment of like being grounded, being present, and like learning. Yeah.
But it's true, and it's when you take the time, you're like, okay, I have like a form of wool there, and you look on your left, and then you have yarn, and it's like, woohoo!
Yeah, exactly.
What happened here? It's like, and you see the whole history, you know?
Yeah, it's like magic, and like just by using your hand and like adding energy, you've kind of like you've made it. It's there. It's a yarn, and
and you're like, I can survive in the wild now. I'm all right. I'm good.
Share your own sheep, and you're good. You've got what you need.
That's it. Exactly. Sometimes you even try like a little thing that just falls from a tree, and you're like, oh, I can make a thread from this.
It happens so many times. Yeah. Like around my mom, there's so she has a chalet in the woods, and there's asclepiades around, and like it's a little pod and kind of a cotton like thing inside. And I always do this. Like if I look at my daughter and she's like calmly playing and I don't need to interfere, I just take them and kind of like be tactile with it.
Yeah, that's it. Or like felt, or just try to make something different from the resource.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a question from Geneviève. She asked, and it's really it's a good question because it brings our next subject. Is it hard to start spinning, and what would be your advice? So what I really wanted also to say with this interview is that you started a new Patreon, and you have on this so many resources and examples, and you put so many articles that you write, and there's a community of people who write questions, and everybody answers everybody.
Yeah.
And just for example, I subscribed 2 weeks ago, and then I was okay. I will go every day, and it will be super nice. But then I just life is life, so it went super fast. And I went this morning again, and I missed like 300 messages of information and stuff, and every information that you could possibly want to learn someday. But if maybe you have your Patreon, maybe we can talk about this a little after. But what would be your advice for Geneviève for starting?
Well, there's two things, and actually, like it's a question I really kind of like. I have an opinion on this. I think for spinning, because it's a movement that like you've never done, your body has never done this. It's not like it's not something that's going to be familiar. So like spinning, it's not that it's hard. It's that it's a steep learning curve. So like the way you're going to learn is you're going to go from this where your movements are going to feel very foreign and not easy. So like learning very, very fast, and that moment is kind of annoying. That's
so it's the beginning. The beginning is
like the moment where like you're kind of dissatisfied on what you're doing. But if you really keep in mind that your first yarns are not going to be the yarns that you're going to be excited about, and those are like muscle memory practice. They're like you being used to the movements. If you keep that in mind, it's actually something that you can pick up so much easier than like other craft techniques. Like you don't need that much material. It's something that's easy. It's just frustrating at the start.
Yeah.
So my advice would be just to keep in mind you won't and you don't want to do like regular yarn at first. That shouldn't be your aim. Your aim should be to feel comfortable in your body doing the movements. Once that's done, you can concentrate on making like the most beautiful yarn ever. But if you don't get comfortable in the movement, it's just going to get frustrating. And that's how you get those false starts and those frustrations.
And just like breaking the scary part of just like dropping your spindle and just be, I always like jump.
That will happen. That happened to everybody, you know, and it's so normal. So that would be my big.
But that's funny because my first ever spinning on a drop spindle.
Yeah.
It was like a very, very, very hard, and I had like a cramp in my wrist, and it was very not nice. But the yarn I made, I was out of control. It was out of control. It was like a stubby, thick and thin, and super, super thin and very and now I try to make a thick and thin, and I can't.
That's like
I can't do this.
The story of my life. But because it's funny because you do take those texture like very negatively at first, and then you take them for granted, and you stop practicing those. And like I actually usually challenge myself to do a little bit of that once in a while to kind of keep the control of like, okay, if I want to do slub, I can. But it's true that you really break out the habit of doing those kind of. Once you get regularity, it's hard to go back.
Yeah, that's it. And I look at my sample and I'm like, what happened? Like it's super. In fact, it is pretty. You know,
yeah.
if you.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah. And the thing is also that sometimes a yarn that you won't be happy with in its yarn form is actually beautiful knitted, and the reverse is also very true. Like there's yarns that I've spun that I was so happy with the skein, and then I was knitting and I was like, oh yeah, not so much. So I think like it's always kind of like accepting that those moments, like those first moments, might be frustrating, but it will really like be a fast learning. It's just that it's really
but it's the first few times. Yeah, the first few times.
And I think also the other thing, to come back on the Patreon, that I think it's really hard sometimes to find resources. And that's something that I think is important. You can start and just try to spin just for the heck of it, and that's totally fine, and that's great as well. But I think sometimes when you read and you know what you're doing and what the components are, like, okay, if I draft, I can draft in these ways, and that will give me this sort of thing. And if I add more twist, it will give me this texture of yarn. To have that in mind, I think really helps with the start as well. I think it's a little bit less challenging, I think, to know when to start when you've got just like the basic information already covered.
Yeah. And is that why you wanted to put on a Patreon? Because when you started, it's hard to find resources, and sometimes I have a few books on spinning, and some are like art yarns and very fancy things, and the other ones are like, this is a sheep, this does this. So it's like super. You have to get like your informations from so many different resources to make a whole.
And I think, because like I know that for me, when I started, and the reason why it took me so long to really find myself in spinning is that I was struggling to find comprehensive resources, so stuff that would talk about a lot of things and not just like one type, like the methods or how to end all your color. So that was, I think that's a generally challenging thing for spinning, and that's really something I wanted to address. And I think in general, for like really starting to spin, there's very little resources. It's either like YouTube videos that will show you out one thing, but they won't necessarily explain you why, and they won't explain to you what you will end up with. And I think, anyway, for me, starting, that was something that was really frustrating, because I wasn't really understanding what I was getting and what I was doing. And so for me, it was like really, really important to like bring method and theory and fiber prep and all those things together, so that it would be like really a place where people could turn to, that would be like this kind of one-stop shop where you would get like a lot of information. And the cool thing is that, as you said, like the community was really, really responsive, and so we've got like this great group of discussion where like helps each other. It's really fun to see. It's fun to see people finding themselves in that too, and like kind of
and that's the thing I love also, is that you have such a focus on techniques, and you really explain, and you take the time to explain everything and the differences between the breeds of sheep and things like this. But also, and mostly, what I really think, it's that you have a sensibility, and you kind of encourage people to find their own creativity in spinning also. So it's, of course, it's a technical art and form of expression, but it's still a form of expression.
And like nothing is rules. They're only things that help you get to where you might want to get, and to obtain what you might want to get. But it's never stiff, and there's not like one way to do things. And because that's something that I'm very like passionate about. I think a lot of
it's still art.
It's still art, and there's to me, thinking that there's one way to, like, one right way to do things is the way to get discouraged and to not like what you're doing. And I know like a lot of kind of spinning training focus a lot on, this is the way to do it, this is the level of torsion you want to put. And that's something that I very consciously, when I write, try to avoid and veer away from, because I think spinning is so much artier than getting that regular balanced yarn. So yeah, that's always something that's really important for me when I write.
But it really shows in the way you explain how you feel about spinning and what you like about it and everything.
I'm really happy that kind of comes true, because it's really something that I want to make sure I encourage in people.
Yeah, so next time I'll make sure to connect to the group in less than 2 weeks, so I have less reading to do. and I really want to thank you for being with us tonight. It was such a pleasure, and we will put all the links for your Patreon and your Instagram also. That is so beautiful. We will put the link on the video so people can go and see what you are doing.
Amazing.
Thank you so much, Dominique, and have a nice time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.